Hi, I'm Hingers and welcome to Good Game Well Played. Today on the show, I get to vicariously live out a dream that never was as we chat to professional StarCraft 2 player Jared Krensel. But first, let's take a look at the news. Australian League of Legends player Shern Tai, who goes by the gamertag Shernfire, has been banned from all competitive League of Legends play. The Daily Dot are reporting that Shernfire, who played jungler for North American side Vortex, has returned to Australia after being found guilty by Riot of ELO boosting, which is basically competitive account sharing in order to boost your competitive rank. The ban is said to last until 2016. And since we last spoke, there's a new GSL champion. Season 2 of the Global Starcraft League in Korea wrapped up last week and was taken out by Korean Protoss Rain, who dominated his compatriot Zerg Byul 4-1 to take out the title. And also, the finals of Season 2 of World Championship StarCraft were held the same weekend in Toronto, Canada. Korean Zerg Hydra beat out French Protoss Lilbo in the final 4-2 in the best of 7, taking home $30,000 in prize money.
And Hydra will be your Season 2 World Championship Series champion!
Congratulations to the winners. That is it for the news. Let's get to the interview. Our guest today recently returned from Toronto, where he was commentating and doing analysis at the aforementioned WCS finals. He's a streamer, professional gamer, and former Australian champion of a game that is played by only the very best and smartest people. It is my pleasure to welcome to the show Jared Krensel. How's it going?
Great, it's awesome to be here, man.
Yeah, thank you for coming here. Now, your gamer tag is Pig. Can I call you Pig?
Of course, most certainly. It's not rude in this context.
Okay.
When you choose the name yourself, it's all right.
Yeah, sure. How did you get started playing StarCraft?
Well, I played a lot of games since I was growing up, but I was never really competitive. I played a lot of games at the LAN cafe when I was in high school. We'd go down, steal a few dollars from mum and dad and play some Counter-Strike. But it wasn't until about 2010 StarCraft 2 came out, and I remember just my friends kind of linking me streams of the tournament saying, check it out, the championship's on, it's the Global Starcraft League. And I was like, what's this? I'd kind of seen a little bit of heard what esports was, and then I kind of tuned in and was like, this is awesome, I got hooked into the game, and I just started playing all day, every day.
And did you watch any competitive Brood War in the lead up to transferring to StarCraft 2? Or?
There's actually an interesting story. Is about 1 month before StarCraft 2 came out, I wasn't excited for the release of the game at all. I wasn't hyped. I was just like, there's so many people excited about it. It's gonna be a letdown. It can't live up to the hype. And my friend pre-ordered the game for me, and actually
cool.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay. Well, you bought me the game, and I paid him back and stuff. I was like, fine, you forced me to buy it. And then we actually went on a holiday, and we were on a flight through Korean Air, and they actually had Brood War videos of the best championship games in the sports tab on the little TV. Yes. And it had English subtitles, and it was the first time I'd ever watched competitive games actually broadcast, and I was blown away because I'd played strategy games since I was a kid. It was always, you're kind of just building your base, and it's this fun sort of thing, right? But seeing it with on the stage, cheering crowds, amazing commentary, it was kind of like, wow, this is actually a really, really cool, incredibly skillful thing. So for me, when I first got into it, I was actually saying, I'm loving this game, I'm playing it all day, I'm loving improving, but realistically, I can't make money off this. But there's people out there that are, and they're not all necessarily players. Some are commentators, some are coaches. So I actually started my own kind of coaching thing online. And I actually quit university. I kind of jumped out, and that was kind of a scary decision. And yeah, I actually started supporting myself through coaching. And then, I'd coach all day, and then all night I'd sit there practicing, trying to get better myself. And eventually I started to actually get overseas to these big tournaments. And it was a really long road. It took a long, long time, but I'm finally at the level now in the last year or two where I could actually compete at a high enough level.
So what did your friends and family think when you told them you were quitting uni to become a professional gamer?
Yeah, it was something where I didn't tell my parents. I distinctly remember not going forward with that discussion until I had some sort of evidence that this was justifiable. Hey, mum and dad, I'm playing video games and I'm not getting paid to do it, I wasn't living at home, so it wasn't too hard to put that off. And
can you imagine trying to hide that from your parents when if you were living at home, they were like, he's always in his room. He's just not going to uni anymore.
I'm doing a research project on this video game. It's very important for my assignment. Yeah, I spent the entire semester not going to class. It's fine. It's this new online lecture thing they've got. I remember, talking to my girlfriend and being like, I think I actually want to do this. And it seemed like there's actually careers growing in it and stuff. So kind of went in and she was really supportive. And a few months down the track, I was, paying my rent and getting by while practicing on the side. And at that point, that's when you go to the parents. You're like, I'm earning money. It's okay. This is semi-legitimate. And they were still very worried for my future, kind of shaking their head like, what are you doing? But there's some measure of acceptance that you're not starving.
Oh, the Halliards, they're gone. No supply.
So was it always going to be StarCraft 2 that caught your attention? Like, can you imagine yourself professionally playing any other video game?
I don't think so. I always played team sports growing up, like, you know, football, I played field hockey, soccer, but I never felt the same sort of intensity that I did with a one-on-one strategy game. And I think when StarCraft 2 came out, it lit that fire in me one more time. And just being able to face off against someone, it's the most intense, and it's also the most punishing sort of thing. When you're playing a team game or a team sport, like, you lose and there's so many factors that go into it, right? And you've got so many other people you're relying on. But while that makes it harder in some aspects, but then in a game like StarCraft, similar to tennis, you've got no one to blame but yourself. So it's this incredibly rewarding but incredibly punishing aspect as well. Like, you feel so devastated when you lose, and you've got no one to blame but yourself. There's absolutely no outlet to say this wasn't my fault.
It was your first final in 5 years since your debut, and you made it to a GSL finals.
So you just got back from WCS Toronto, which is, I guess, the biggest event you've done, or... Yeah, close to.
It's definitely the biggest I've commentated at, and it's been a sort of whirlwind jumping into commentary recently. I got offered to commentate the round of 32, which is done in studio.
Yeah.
And then right afterwards, just recently, Toronto, which is a big stage in the convention center in Toronto, a huge city. You know, it's like a mini New York over there, and the Canadian StarCraft fans are absolutely insane. If you talk to Canadian people in any sport, they'll say, we just like to be the loudest crowd. It doesn't matter like what the game is. It could be European handball, and we will be screaming our hands off, like clapping and cheering, and it lived up to the expectation. It was really cool. Going over there, it was like, I got to commentate and watch these games up close, and knowing firsthand what it's like as a player, where you put everything, like, for years you're training. And this is something where a lot of people think, you know, maybe you train for a few months and you can get to be a pro level, but it's just like any other sport. There's years of like learning how to improve, learning how to play, and you're doing it all without a sort of coach or a structure which you might find in a more established mainstream sport.
So what were some of the highlights of the tournament for you?
I think just watching it from the commentary side of things, it was really cool to actually see these players who've put so much into it, and especially follow the path of Lilbo, who he's a French player. I actually lived with him for a bit last year, and to see him kind of come through, and he was his first time ever making it to the Premier League. He's been this player who, a lot of pro players, that we've faced him on the ladder, he's been grinding us into the dust, and he'd come to these tournaments and he'd kind of get nervous, or, you know, he'd fall apart a little bit. And then this was his first time making it to Premier League, and he kind of just steamed through the round of 32, steamed through the round of 16. He just kept winning stage after stage, and everyone was getting more and more kind of excited watching it. And you could see it, you know, it's really great at these live events because you've actually got the great camera set up. You can see the players' emotions, and you could see him kind of getting a little bit of like, yeah, I'm doing this, all right. And he just kind of started, made it all the way to the finals. Just seeing him, this player who's like trained for years with nothing really to show for it in terms of results. He's been on that like long, really hard road of getting to the top, and finally have it like pay off in one brilliant flash is really cool.
And that's particularly interesting because he's not a Korean. And for people who don't know, like, the scene is just dominated internationally and globally by these Korean professionals, but having a French player in the finals is rare, right? Having what they term a foreigner in the finals is like, that's super rare, yeah?
Yeah, it's weird, you know, we call anyone outside of Korea a foreigner because that's how StarCraft works, you know. So I think that was the first time in 2 years we've had a non-Korean in the finals of the World Championship Series, so it was a kind of cool, historic moment. And I guess it kind of comes back to when you look at the way the Korean scene's set up, because they've had this great, rich history of StarCraft. And if you look at Seoul, it's a city, you know, a sprawling metropolis of 15 million people, all in one location. And they've got these great leagues, which are set up all in one spot. And every week you've got these team houses all living in this one city. They've got players that practice together, coaches, and they sit there just training so hard, and they've always got a new match. There's always a match next weekend. You know who your opponent is, and both players are like training the trickiest builds, the cleverest ways to abuse each other. Whereas you see in the foreign scene, right, we're all flying from Australia, from France, from America, all to this one place. So it has to be concentrated, just one weekend, just 3 or 4 days.
What is the difference in terms of preparing for one match where you know you've got one player on this map set who you're going to play against versus I'm going to a LAN where I'm going to be playing 30 different people and need to work my way through this entire tournament?
As a pro player going into an event where you know you've got to play a lot of players, it's all about your fundamentals. You've got to be rock solid, and you play, I guess, what you'd call a safer style. Whereas if you know your opponent, I mean, it's similar to the fundamentals of warfare. If you read like Sun Tzu or something like that, right? Know your opponent's weakness and this sort of stuff. When you're going into a tournament, there's 20 different dudes you're going to play. You can't know everyone's weakness. You're much more focused on shoring up your own defenses, right?
Right.
But if you're going in up against a player, you know each other. It's this completely different training. I remember the first time I got it in the World Championship Series in my Challenger match. And you know your opponent, and you're there, and you're finding these really tricky builds. You're finding the smallest ways you can abuse your opponent. And you can take these big risks off the back of knowing how to limit your opponent's information. So there's like these real gambit sort of plays you can start to play a lot more often. You can take these really sort of strange, very fine-tuned aggressive plays, which in a bigger tournament format, you use once it's been seen and it's no longer valid. But against one opponent, that could be a free win.
How do you do research about these players then? Are you going through replay packs? Are you kind of stalking them on their stream? Like, what are you doing?
It's funny, you do see before a tournament, players start deleting their stream VODs specifically so people can't look them up. Other people sometimes have already downloaded and saved the stream VODs to their computers. There's a lot of hiding, and I have a friend, he plays and he goes, I've got this big tournament, I know he's going to be watching, and he just goes on stream and starts playing different builds to what he's actually going to play.
What, to throw his opponents? To throw his opponents if they're watching.
Off. Yeah, it gets really kind of convoluted and messy how you want to go about it, but there's a lot of looking up your opponents. It's similar to, I guess, in lots of boxing matches, lots of sports, you always try and watch your opponent's footage, right? Yeah. Look for those habits, and you look for those things which they probably don't even realize they're doing, those really natural habits, and that's what you try to exploit.
What is the Australian scene like right now, and who are the top players who should be looking out for?
Australia is a really interesting scene. We've always been quite isolated from the rest of the world, so we've always had our own very separate sort of scene in most esports. But in StarCraft especially, New Zealand's very much a part of the Australian scene, as is Southeast Asia in terms of Singapore and the Philippines and so on. So in our scene, it's been in a state of flux because we've seen players like myself trying to commentate and mix other sort of things. And I've also been traveling overseas last year. And the other top players in Australia have also been competing in America. Some of them moved to America. The top New Zealand player, Petraeus, lived in Switzerland most recently. And at the moment, we're actually seeing a lot of us coming home, maybe for the long term, maybe temporarily. So there's always a state of flux. I think King Kong is the resident kind of most dominating player in recent years in Australian history. He used to be a Korean pro gamer in StarCraft 1, came here to study, and in his part-time decided to win almost every tournament for the last 2 years.
Who are your favorite players to watch as well?
Oh, I love Life. Life is like everyone's favorite player. I can't learn anything from watching him play, though. I mean, he's so fast. He's just incredibly fast, incredibly crazy. He does things no one else will do, and he's just got such confidence. He came out when he was still, I believe, 15 years old. Yeah. And I was actually in Korea for a very brief stint at the time, and I got to watch his GSL championship. It was his first time ever in GSL. He came through as a 15-year-old and was like, yeah, I'm going to beat this guy. And he was playing the undisputed best player in the world for the previous year and a half. And he just said, I'm just going to destroy him. It's going to be so easy. Everyone's like, who is this kid? And he did it. He went through with it. And since then, he's always shown the biggest gambles at the most crucial times, but he always can read his opponent's mind. He's just got this great kind of poker sense about him.
So what are the struggles you run through as an Australian trying to make it in a game that is dominated by Koreans?
I guess it's kind of a two-pronged problem, right? You're living in Australia, you're on the far end of the world, very, very far away from everything. So, it's a very new industry. There's not a lot of money. So when you're looking at spending 4 or 5 times as much on flights as most of the other players in Europe and America, there's that end of the fact that you don't have as many opportunities. So you've got to make them count more. You've got to be more focused. You're also playing with lag. You're playing not only on Australian internet, which is a bit unstable, NBN, please. But also you've got, you're playing to American servers, you're playing to Korean servers. So you're always playing with a little bit of a disadvantage. And then you take that pretty much anyone outside of the Korean scene also, you've basically got to face against, we were talking before about that Korean training regimen, right? You're in a team house, you've got coaches looking over your shoulder, pointing out how to improve. You've got other players there. Whenever you're stuck, you're like, how do I win against Protoss or whatever the problem is? And your mate can show you how he's doing it. Here in Australia, you're like, hop onto Skype and message your buddy in Denmark. And you're like, hey man, can you help me with this? And he's like, I'm asleep, you've got all these boundaries.
Leave me alone. It's 2 o'clock in the morning here. What are you doing?
Exactly. Please hop on Skype. Let's talk about this, man. So you end up basically having to be your own coach, your own guy that just studies the top Korean players on their broadcasts, figures it out. You kind of end up just having to try to make up the difference by being twice as motivated, I guess, which most of us fall pretty far short of, which is why we don't beat Korean players very often.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Please come back anytime and, keep us up to date with the best and smartest game played by the best and smartest people.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, man.
All right, that is it for today's show. As always, let us know if you've got any upcoming events you'd like us to mention or if you're part of an esports scene you'd like us to cover. Until next time, Hingers out. See ya!